On December 21st, 1943, a B-24 Liberator heavy bomber lifted off from Ladd Army Airfield near Fairbanks, Alaska, at approximately 9:45 in the morning. The plane was nicknamed the Iceberg Inez. Its mission was routine, a high-altitude feathering test to evaluate engine performance in extreme cold. 5 men were aboard. Second Lieutenant Harold Hoskin, the pilot, known to his crew as Husse. First Lieutenant Leon Crane, the co-pilot, 24 years old, a city boy from Philadelphia with no wilderness experience. Master Sergeant Richard Pompeo, the flight engineer. Staff Sergeant Ralph Wenz, the radio operator. First Lieutenant James Seibert, a propeller specialist. They were all dressed for the cold. Heavy flight suits, boots, gloves, prepared for temperatures that could drop to -40 or -50 degrees Fahrenheit on the ground. The plane climbed to 20,000 feet. At 11:08, approximately 65 miles east of Ladd Field near Big Delta, they sent their last radio message back to base. They continued searching for a patch of clear sky necessary to conduct the feathering exercise. Just before noon, they found their opening. They shut down one of the 4 engines and angled the propeller to test drag reduction. The test was successful, but as they prepared to restart the engine, something went wrong. The B-24 began to spin. Hoskin fought the controls, trying to pull the plane out of the dive. It would not respond. The bomber spiraled faster, the altimeter unwinding rapidly as the plane plunged toward the mountains below. At approximately 12,000 feet, Hoskin gave the order to bail out. Crane grabbed a parachute and moved toward the rear of the plane. Pompeo grabbed one too. The others stayed at their stations, either unable to reach parachutes in time or choosing to stay with the pilot. Crane jumped. The wind tore at him as he fell through the freezing air. His parachute opened. Below him, he saw Pompeo's parachute deploy as well. Then he saw the Iceberg Inez slam into a mountaintop overlooking the Charley River. The plane exploded in a ball of flame. Crane landed in hip-deep snow. The impact knocked the wind out of him. He lay there for a moment, gasping, trying to process what had just happened. He called out for Pompeo. "Ho!" No response. He called again, louder this time. Nothing. The silence of the wilderness swallowed his voice. Crane was alone. He took stock of his situation. He had survived the jump, but he was stranded in one of the most remote and hostile environments on Earth. The Charley River drainage, deep in the Alaskan interior, more than 100 miles from the nearest settlement. The date was December 21st, the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. Temperatures were already below -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Crane had 3 items with him: a Boy Scout knife, 2 packs of matches, his parachute, no food, no map, no radio. No survival training. He was a city boy who had arrived in Alaska only 2 months earlier. He had never spent a night in the wilderness. He had no idea how to hunt, trap, or build a proper shelter. But he was alive, and that meant he had to move. Crane spent the first night near the crash site, wrapping himself in his parachute and trying to stay warm. The cold woke him every 2 hours. He would unwrap himself, gather more wood, build up the fire, then re-wrap himself like a silkworm in a cocoon and try to sleep again. In the morning, he realized that no rescue was coming immediately. The Air Force knew the general area where the plane had gone down, but the mountains stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. Finding a single man in that vastness would take time, if it happened at all. Crane made a decision. He would descend to the river and follow it downstream. Rivers lead to settlements. It was the only logic he had. For the next 9 days, Crane camped on the banks of the Charley River. He kept a fire going with his matches, rationing them carefully. He needed food, but he had no weapon and no experience hunting. He watched squirrels dart through the trees, tantalizingly close but always just out of reach. He tried throwing rocks and sticks. His throws were clumsy and loud. The squirrels scattered before he could get within range, their bushy tails disappearing into the branches. He tried fashioning crude traps from parachute cord and branches. None of them worked. After 9 days of effort, he had not caught a single squirrel. He drank water from holes in the ice where the river bubbled through, crawling across the frozen surface on his stomach to reach it. His beard frosted over from the effort. He chewed on vegetation, twigs, bark, anything he could find, but he did not swallow it. There was no nutrition in it, but the act of chewing gave him something to do, a distraction from the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. He played mind games to keep himself from breaking down. He ate snow and pretended it was a milkshake. He imagined meals he would eat when he got home. Steak, mashed potatoes, his mother's cooking. By the 9th day, he was weak and growing weaker. His body was beginning to consume itself. He knew that if he stayed there, he would die. On the 10th day, Crane packed his parachute and began walking downstream. The snow was deep. The rocks were treacherous. Every step risked a sprained ankle or a broken leg, either of which would be fatal. He kept his hands tucked under his armpits for warmth. After a day of trudging through the snow, he saw something, a small cabin, half buried in snow. It was tiny, 10 feet by 12 feet, barely large enough for a bed, a table, and a small stove. Crane approached cautiously, unsure if it was real or a hallucination brought on by hunger and cold. The door was unlocked. Inside, he found food, canned goods, sugar, powdered milk, a rifle and ammunition, mittens, warm clothing, a cache with tools and supplies. Most importantly, firewood and a functioning stove. Crane could not believe his luck. He later learned that the cabin belonged to a trapper named Phil Berail. It was the custom in remote Alaska to leave cabins unlocked and stocked with supplies for any traveler in need. Trappers understood that, in the wilderness, a well-stocked cabin could mean the difference between life and death for a stranded stranger. Crane stayed in the cabin for a week. He ate. He rested. He fought the frostbite that had begun to develop on his fingers and toes. One night, he found a map of Alaska tucked away in a drawer. He studied it by candlelight. The nearest settlement was a mining camp called Woodchopper, but he had no idea where he was on the map. He assumed that because he had found a cabin, civilization must be close. In reality, he was still 60 miles from the nearest human and 100 miles from any real settlement. On the morning after his week of rest, Crane packed food and supplies into a makeshift sled he had constructed from materials in the cabin. He set out downstream again, expecting to see a village around the next bend. Days passed. No village appeared. The river stretched on endlessly. On February 12th, nearly 8 weeks after the crash, Crane was still walking. The sled he had built was heavy and cumbersome. Multiple times, the ice broke beneath him as he crossed the river. In one incident, he fell through completely, plunging into the bone-chilling water. He thought he was going to drown. The current pulled at him, trying to drag him under the ice. His heavy clothing absorbed water instantly, weighing him down like an anchor. Somehow, he found footing on the river bottom and pushed himself upward. He broke through the surface, gasping, and clawed his way back onto solid ice. His clothes froze solid within minutes. He had to keep moving or die. He abandoned the sled after that, carrying what little food he had left in a backpack. A few days later, he found another cabin. This one was also unlocked and stocked with food. Crane stayed for several days, using the time to repair his tattered clothing with scraps of parachute silk and pieces of shroud line. He rested. He ate. Then he continued walking. By early March, Crane had been in the wilderness for nearly 3 months. He had walked more than 100 miles. His beard was long and wild. His hair was matted and unkempt. His skin was blackened from sun and wind exposure. His clothes were a patchwork of salvaged material. He looked, as he would later say, like some strange species of prehistoric man. On March 9th, Crane saw something different, a dog sled trail, recently used. His heart raced. He followed the trail. The next day, March 10th, he came to a third cabin. This one had smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was home.
Ames!
Crane approached the door and knocked. A native man named Albert Ames opened it.
Crane?
Ames stared at the figure standing in front of him. This wild-looking man in a tattered parka, filthy and exhausted.
Help!
Crane tried to explain he had crashed in a plane. He had been walking for months. He needed help. Ames listened to the incredible story,
I appreciate it.
then invited Crane inside.
Get some rest, Crane.
Crane saw himself in a mirror for the first time since the crash. His eyes stared back at him from the centers of 2 deep black circles. He barely recognized himself.
You followed the Charley
Ames told him
River
they were 30
along
miles
this
from
ridge.
Woodchopper.
I understand.
Crane had walked approximately 120 miles down the Charley River in sub-zero conditions. He had spent 81 of those days completely alone in the wilderness. Ames offered to take him the rest of the way by dog sled. The following day, Ames harnessed his dogs and mushed Crane to Woodchopper. At the mining camp, Crane was introduced to Phil Berail in person.
Thanks, Phil.
Berail was a legendary figure in the region, a hard man who had once cut off half a frozen finger, wrapped it in a clean cloth, and continued his trap line without complaint. When Crane thanked him for the cabin that had saved his life, Berail shrugged. It was simply the way things were done in Alaska. You left food for strangers because one day you might be the stranger who needed it. Contact was made to Ladfield. The radio operator on the other end was told that Leon Crane was alive. There was a long pause. Then the operator, his voice shaking, confirmed that Crane had been presumed dead. His crew had been presumed dead. Funerals had been planned. On March 14, 1944, 84 days after the crash, Leon Crane returned to Ladfield. Service members who had known him struggled to believe it was really him. He had to convince them. His first question was about the rest of the crew. Had any of them been found? The answer was no. In the weeks that followed, search parties returned to the crash site. They found the bodies of 2 crew members in the wreckage of the Iceberg Inez, Staff Sergeant Ralph Wenz, the radio operator, and First Lieutenant James Seibert, the propeller specialist. They had stayed with the plane. Today, a small airfield near Fairbanks bears Ralph Wenz's name, a memorial to the radio operator who went down with his aircraft. Second Lieutenant Harold Hoskin, the pilot, and Master Sergeant Richard Pompeo, the flight engineer, were never found. Not then. 63 years later, in 2006, another search team returned to the site. They sifted through the soil and found bone fragments. DNA testing confirmed they belonged to Second Lieutenant Harold Hoskin. Master Sergeant Richard Pompeo's remains were never recovered. Crane called his parents in Philadelphia. They had been told he was missing and presumed dead. Hearing his voice on the other end of the line, they wept. A surgeon at Ladfield examined Crane. Despite everything, he was in remarkably good health. He had even gained a little weight from the food in the cabins. His frostbite was manageable. His body had adapted to the extreme conditions. Crane remained in the Army Air Forces. Despite everything he had endured, he continued flying missions. He did not ask for a transfer or a desk job. He went back into B-24s, back into the Alaskan skies where he had nearly died. When asked why, he said simply that it was his duty. The other crews looked at him differently after that, with a mixture of respect and disbelief. They knew what it took to get back in the cockpit. The story of Crane's survival became a sensation. The New York Times ran the headline, "Fallen U.S. Flyer 84 days in Arctic.
It's an honor.
Lieutenant brings first word of his bomber, missing with 5 men since Deck 21." Crane was interviewed on the radio. He recounted his experience, though he admitted that much of it was a blur. The days had blended together in a haze of cold, hunger, and exhaustion. After the war, Crane returned to civilian life, eventually settling in Pennsylvania. He rarely spoke about his ordeal. When asked how he survived, he would say that he simply did what needed to be done each day. He did not consider himself a hero. He considered himself lucky. In 1976, author John McPhee featured Crane's story in his book, Coming into the Country, a reflection on Alaska's wilderness and the people who lived there. In 2015, journalist Brian Murphy published a full account of Crane's survival in a book titled 81 Days Below Zero, the incredible survival story of a World War II pilot in Alaska's frozen wilderness. The book brought Crane's story to a new generation. Leon Crane died on March 26, 2002, at the age of 82. His story remains one of the most remarkable survival tales in Air Force history. Leon Crane did not survive 84 days in the Arctic because he was an expert outdoorsman. He survived because of 3 strangers he never met. Phil Berail, who built a cabin and stocked it with food for travelers he would never know. Another trapper, whose name is lost to history, who did the same. And Albert Ames, who found him when he had nothing left to give. He survived because in the harshest place on Earth, human kindness had been there first, waiting in unlocked cabins for someone who needed it. In a wilderness where a single misstep meant death, where temperatures dropped to 40 below zero, where 9 days of hunger taught him that skill mattered less than will, Leon Crane made a choice. He refused to lie down. For 84 days, he took one more step, and then another, and another. Carried by his own refusal to stop and the generosity of people he would never know, those steps eventually led him home.